In this video, I will show you how I created this dreamlike Frutiger Arrow train interior from start to finish. We first cover the modeling and the composition of the scene, which is really simple but effective. Moving on to the shaders and how to set up the lighting and how to create the paint effect using my free paint filter. And we also learn how to create this simple water shader. Finishing up by adding some vegetation and some fishes. Let's get it! Just a small disclaimer before we start, I will not show how to model the tree and vegetation assets here, and I will also not show how to model and animate the fishes because both of these are made with these two add-ons. But I will definitely guide you to some free alternatives, but we will cover how to animate the plants. Okay, so the first step is to create our foundation, and we are going to start with very simple with a plane. In edit mode, I'm just gonna grab this edge here, just scale it somewhere like this. This is our floor. I'm gonna duplicate the whole thing. I'm going to rotate it around the X 90 and then put it close to the floor and to the top. If it doesn't match perfectly, it doesn't matter at the moment, but this is our foundation, believe it or not. That's it. And then we are going to create a camera, and this camera we're going to move somewhere here. And then we are going to create a new window, and in this window I'm gonna press 0 on the numpad, so we have our render view, and on the right I have my 3D view. In the camera, please activate or enable the password 2 and put it to 1, and also decheck these two buttons so you have no UI, so everything is clean. Now the next step is I'm going to, under view, I am going to enable camera to view. This allows me to move the camera inside my render view basically, so I just have a little bit easier time trying to figuring out the main composition of the whole scene. Okay, in the end this is my camera. The focal length in the end is 31.3. The 0.3 is super important. I'm just kidding, whatever, just make it like 30. And this is positioned somewhere like this. In case you want to copy the values one by one, you could do it. In the next step, we are going to add some thickness to this wall here actually, and then we are going to duplicate the whole thing, put it on the top, and then we are going to give this a thickness but into the other direction a little bit, and we're just gonna make this a little bit higher, so we have something like this. So this is basically the windows and the doors, and this is the thing above the windows and the walls. And then we are also going to create another cube. Like I said, doesn't need to be perfectly aligned because nobody is going to see that. And this is going to be our the ceiling. Okay, let's make the floor. Let's just extend it a little bit so we have the whole camera view. And sometimes what I like to do is actually drop a human model. This is actually a human model from the Blender Foundation. You can get it for free. And this is just a male model with 1.8 meters. It's really useful because now you can judge the whole dimensions of the whole thing a little bit better. I would say this kind of makes sense. Like if he's on the ground and this is like the door and this is the thing above the door, I think this kind of makes sense. So yeah. And for this we are going to taper it a little bit like this and then hit him with a bevel. Nice. Shade smooth. Okay. Something like this. Okay, next step, we are going to create a cube. I'm gonna scale this down a little bit, apply the scale, make sure this thing goes through the whole wall. And in orthographic, we can go to somewhere like here. I just make sure that we grab the whole thing, just the faces here, the edges here, I'm sorry. And then I'm just gonna bevel the whole thing, so we have something like, yeah, something like this. And this is actually our bevel or boolean. So we are going to use a boolean modifier for the wall, and then we are going to where's the boolean? And then we are going to use this cube we just created. We're just gonna hide this thing. Yeah, so this works. Something I like to use is actually if we enable our boolean object again, is we go into the boolean object into edit mode. We select everything with double A, and then Shift D, and then I'm going to just move it to another place, and then maybe duplicate it again, and then move it to another place. Basically what I'm trying to say is I stay in the same object. I'm not going to create for each of the windows a new Boolean object, and then we are duplicating it again. And let's say between these two windows we have our door, and the train door is always going to have, let's say, two smaller windows. So we're going to do something like this. Obviously in the end you should place them you know, with a bit more centered and more aligned. And now we're gonna hide the thing. Let's just create the back wall really quickly. So let's just create a cube, put it somewhere like this, somewhere like this. Actually this is way too thick. Make something like this. Back wall, finished. Very simple. Okay, so this is now my final, like the real Boolean I use in the project. You can see it's pretty much the same thing as I just created, just the proportion a little bit different. And if I just hide it, you can see this is how it looks. The next step is to separate the doors and the wall. So at the moment it's just one single mesh. We're gonna change that. So we go into edit mode, and then I go Control R, and I'm just gonna make a cut here. And then I'm trying to make the face, make the door just a little bit more, let's say, real from the proportions. So this edge we're gonna also do something, yeah, something like this. This looks about right. And then I'm going to, in face selection, grab the whole faces here, and then P selection. So now I have two separate objects. One is the door and one is the wall. Next, for the wall, I am going to create some more cuts. One cut I'm going to do here and here. So where the doors are from the Boolean, something like this. I don't even care about the alignment because all I want to do is just delete the faces actually. So I'm just gonna grab them and then X faces. That's what I want. And we do all this because we're gonna apply the Boolean for the door. Yes, I'm gonna apply this because now I can Alt D to instance and place the same door basically here, just so we can assure that's always the same size. We don't need to eyeball everything in this project. And then also make sure for the wall, because we cutted it, that we make sure to fill the faces here with F, and we do this for all the wall elements here. And also for the door segment, we also fill the gap here. Since it's a linked mesh, every door will now be updated. Now I just make sure that the door is relatively in the middle of the two windows, something like this. I just eyeball it, and then come to the wall segment in edit mode, and then just close the gap as close as I can. And then in the wall segment, I'm just gonna add a small bevel, which is very beautiful. And we do the same thing for the door. We're also gonna add a little bevel like this, so we have this much more clean, hard surface panel cut type of thing. Here's a small trick. You can grab this door and then this door with no bevel modifier, and then shift select the door with the bevel modifier, Control L, and then copy modifiers, and now our bevel is copied. Next, I just added a small cube here and then extruded upwards, which acts like a separation between the door and the wall. And then we're gonna also hit them with a small bevel, and then just Alt D between every door and every wall. Perfect. Next, I want to add some metal pipe handles, so I'm gonna select this area with my cursor and then Shift A and then create a single word, and then in edit mode I press E to extrude, and E again, so I have one edge, and then extrude this downwards, and then extrude it back into this thing. So we have something like this. Now here's a neat trick. So we're gonna select this point, and now we're gonna press Ctrl Shift B to bevel, and then we're gonna use our scroll wheel to make it round, something like this. And now here's a pro gamer move. So we are going to go to Object, and then we are going to convert this into a curve. Okay, and then inside the curve we are going to give it a little bit of depth and then a bit more resolution, but it's not that important. And this way you can create some really nice pipes super easily. And once you're happy, you can just always go to convert it back into a mesh, and now we have a solid mesh Very nice. And next step is just to, again, just Alt D it, and then just gonna place it where we want it, and probably select all of them, and then shade auto smooth, doesn't hurt. Then I duplicate it with Shift D, and then I place this on the ceiling. And I'm just gonna go to edit mode, grab all of these faces, and then drag it somewhere to the end. And now drag this outside the camera. And now we have also some railings on the top, but I'm gonna scale them a little bit so they are much thicker than the normal handles at the ground, something like this. And then we can also Alt D that, and then to symmetrize a little bit. And just making sure that the end of the handles, you can see them inside the camera. Next, we're gonna model these handles really quickly, super simple. We're going to start by adding a plane, scale this down and rotate it. And I'm gonna grab in edit mode these two vertices and then press M and then add merge at center, so we have a triangle. Now we're going to insert the face. We're going to delete the face, and then we're going to grab these edges and then Ctrl B to bevel them and create a nice rounded shape, something like this. And then we are also going to extrude it, so we give this whole thing thickness. Now we add a single loop cut in the middle, and then we can scale it outwards a little bit and move the whole thing a little bit more down. So at the bottom we have more substance, let's say. And then this we can also give a little bit of a bevel, something like this. And for these we can also give them a very small bevel, something like this. And then now we can press Ctrl 1 to give it a sub D modifier, shade auto smooth, and just increase the angle to a high number, and now we have it. Now we're gonna make it extra easy, mesh cylinder, scale this bad boy down, and then we just grab the top face and just put it somewhere here. Actually, maybe put this below the metal pipe thing. If you feel fancy, you can also create a cut here and then bevel the whole thing to create this. Press E once and then Alt S to scale it inwards, something like this, so we can create some sort of a, intersection, whatever. Shade all smooth, and you can also hit them with a small bevel if you want to, but I don't think it's super necessary, but why the fuck not? For both of the objects, we're going to apply the modifiers, so we can Ctrl J them without any troubles. And now we can add the array modifier, give it maybe an offset of something like 30, and then we're just gonna make it reaches the end of the whole train. Yeah, maybe something like this. I think it looks pretty nice. And you can also Alt D to the other side, so we have everything a bit more symmetrized. Next, I want to edit this thing here a little bit, so we are going to grab the back face, and then we are going to translate it, make it shorter, somewhere like something like this. Then object origin to geometry, and then we are going to also add a array modifier, and we are going to create a little bit of a bigger offset, so we have a big cut, maybe not that big, something like this. And then we also increase the count until it reaches the end. Important is now that we add a bevel modifier, and this way we can create some sort of panel cuts. Looks pretty nice. I would also like to edit the wall, so I'm going to apply the boolean, only the boolean, not the bevel. I'm going to isolate the view with the backslash on my numpad, and then I'm going to make this whole wall much thicker, something like this. And now I'm gonna select all these loops like this. I'm just gonna repeat this for all of the wall segments, and now I can bevel them to create some sort of intersection, hard surface, whatever, you know what I mean. It just looks nice, looks a little bit more realistic. And then we are going to lower the bevel to increase the sharpness of the whole thing. Now we can see this looks much nicer, basically, just adding more details. Okay, so the modeling part is basically done for the interior. We are still missing the seats, like the chairs. They are still very important, but we will cover them a little bit later, because I actually want to talk about the lighting. So we have cycles activated, we have this background node turned to 0, and it is pitch black, perfect. So if we then crank this up, we can see, okay, now we have some light in this whole thing. And my light setup is the sky texture. This is like the backbone of the whole thing. Multi-scattering, because we are in Blender 5.0. And if we plug this in, we can see nothing, because we need to turn this up a little bit at least. And the main thing about this is basically the sun elevation and the sun rotation. And the idea behind my light setup in this project is so we have some sort of sun rays coming through the windows. So if I do something like this, we can see, yeah, we have these nice highlights coming from the window. I think this makes a lot of sense. And if we crank up the ozone, we can make everything a little bit more bluish. This is what we want in this project. And this is the final sky texture that I use in my project. So these are the settings. You can copy them one by one practically. So the background is 0.3 and these are the settings. I also increase the sun size a little bit, because if it's completely zero, we have these completely sharp edges. But I think it's kind of ugly, and I think it's kind of nice if we have a little bit of fall off. Maybe it's not super realistic because the sun obviously has no scattering if there are no clouds or whatever, but I don't care. It just looks nice. And we have this, let's say, very bluish undertone of everything, mainly because of this ozone at 7. Okay, but the secret trick for this whole thing to work is to Shift A, and we're going to create an area light. And for this area light, we're going to change the shape to rectangle. This allows us to make it like really, really long, okay? Make it a long boy, and then turn this down, the Y, to make it narrow. And then we're going to crank the power to maybe something like 200. Yeah, something like this. Looks really nice. So now it looks like there's a light coming from the top, which makes sense because normally there are lights at the top of the train, which we're going to model in a second, which is honestly really easy because it's just a rectangle. But we're going to decrease the spread to make it not super diffuse, something like this. And the secret trick is to now have like the opposite color, not the opposite color, but make it like pinkish, okay? Not like this is maybe too much, but something like this works really well. And this but it synergizes really well with the blue from the sky texture. And this is how we would create like this sort of dream aesthetic. Now let's talk about the materials. So for the door and for the walls, the ceiling, so everything train interior, let's say the normal train interior, we have at the moment just a principal BSDF, so the standard one. And this is the final material I use in the project. If we just delete this node for a second, we can see that in comparison to this and this from standard one, basically no difference. I just turned the metalness a little bit up and the roughness a little bit down. Otherwise, the same thing. But this ambient occlusion node, that's the main player here. And if we plug this in from color to base color, we can see that the intersections, the contrast is just much higher at these areas. You can research what ambient occlusion does. I'm not going to explain it here because it's going to be a little bit too long. But just know that this node is a really crazy cheat code if you want to, let's say, change the contrast in the intersections where the light is not shining without changing the light, right? It's just basically a little bit cheat code. It's absolutely not realistic. It's more stylistic choice. In my opinion, it works really well here. And with this distance value, you can adjust how strong this effect is going to be. In my case, I just chose a little bit of just a little bit of distance. And you can also change the color here. I made it a little bit less bright, a little bit bluish. It's not super important. Important is distance and ambient occlusion node. Samples, keep it 16. And we are good. Look at this, really nice. And for the metal handles, obviously we're gonna need a metal material. So instead of the normal principle, we are going to plug in this principle with metal high, roughness down. So we have some sort of metal effect. At the moment, the environment is way too, let's say, bluish. So you're not gonna see a crazy effect, but it's just important to make this metal. Since everything is instance, everything will be adjusted accordingly. Next up, we are going to create the water, finally. And before I start, I actually want to mention that, so this is the water, the final water actually, but you can see that if I hide the floor now, we can see that the whole aesthetic is going to change. It makes a tremendous difference where this floor is going to be because this is reflecting a lot of light at the moment. So if the floor is just a little bit more down, we can see the effect makes a whole different changes the whole vibe of the whole scene. So this is really important. So at the moment I'm going to hide the floor, and we're going to see how to create this water. So the base for the water is just a plane, because we keep it simple. And this plane, we are going to make it in edit mode. We make it longer, bigger to cover everything. Make sure that this is not completely like on the floor, but a little bit like above the floor, something like this. And then we are going to select the water 02, whatever. Just this is the water shade that I use in the end, and I'm going to break it down how this works. So the first step is I actually cut every connection here, and we start from 0, and we're going to start from this principal BSDF. So this is the base of everything. I have actually a really dark base color, and I turn on the metalness a little bit up, even though it doesn't make sense, but it just works. The alpha 0.8, the weight 0.9, and then I plug in a mix of a bump, noise, mapping, and texture coordinate. It's like the standard thing you use every time you create a water, basically. Plug this into the water, and we can see we can create these sort of small waves. You can basically copy the values here. I'm not gonna go through all of them now. It's just that the roughness makes a huge difference in the appearance. I just make sure that this is relatively low. And like I said, the rest you can just copy these values. The frame divided by 2800 kind of makes a nice speed, in my opinion. If we play it, you can see that, yeah, it kind of looks nice. And also I keep this super low to make this small waves. And the heavy lifting is created by the displacement setup here. And we can just break it down. It looks complicated, but we can break this down into, let's say, easier steps. So let's hide this and hide this. So at the moment we only have this displacement with these numbers. You can just copy a noise texture, mapping, and texture coordinate. And this is how the noise texture would look like. Literally a standard noise texture. And we can see much more details for the water. And the trick is to use another noise texture. And this one is much less contrasty because we have normalize activated, and it's also much higher in the scale. In this case it's -6, but if it's +6, the same thing, no difference. Okay, and we combine these two noise textures with a mix node and just mix them together. Don't forget to normalize. And this is how the noise texture looks like now with it mix. I have a little bit more favor towards the smaller noise texture, but you can obviously do it however you want. Then I have a color ramp, which makes everything less strong, let's say, in the displacement. And that's it, basically. Just make sure that this is, let's say, gray, darkish, and the black one I didn't touch. And if we just plug this back in, we can see, okay, so the whole heavy lifting is basically this displacement setup here. And here you can also see the heavy lifting this color ramp does without it, and with it, tremendous difference. Do not forget this. Now for the animation, we can see that the whole water is obviously animated. And in this case, I've used the old hashtag frame. So in case you didn't know, hashtag frame gives us a number based on the frame you're at the moment. So we basically never need to animate with keyframes. And after hashtag frame, I use 320 for the W, 320 for the W in this case as well. Make sure it's 4D, otherwise you don't have this W. And for the mapping node, we also have the driver here. If I delete it for a second, we can see that in this case, I'm able to direct the water direction. That's pretty funny and is really nice. In this case, 200. These are the numbers. Just know that I showed you something that you're not supposed to see at the moment. These two lights, I'm sorry, but spoiler. So in the end, I used two rectangles. Okay, super easy. Extrude it out and make insert in the middle. Extrude a little bit inwards, and in the inside face, I use a new material, which is basically just a pink emission shader. And that's about it. I just slap a big bevel onto it for no reason. But this is also pretty nice because we have this nice shadow as for more separation, and then we have this pink light which is synergizes with the pink area light we just created earlier. So it just, the whole thing just makes more sense. So the light, the pink light is actually coming from somewhere. Okay, that's about it. Next, I'm gonna turn on the floor. This is the final floor of my project. Now this looks absolutely weird, I am aware, don't worry. We go back into the water shader. Now we have two more things to cover. Okay, the first thing is principal volume into the volume, and boom, there we go. Big difference, because now we can color our water. In this case, I have this cyan color, looks really dreamlike, super nice. This is the density, just copy the values if you want to. But yeah, without the floor, you won't see the difference in the volume. So this is why I have to show you with the floor. And this one, I cannot really explain to you why this works, but if you mix your principal, your main shader, with a transparent BSCF and use the camera ray from the light path node into the factor, if we use this, the water just becomes much brighter. But this is a little bit better than using this, because then, I don't know, it just makes the water just doesn't look that, you know, dark. It just makes the water just more friendly looking. I have no idea how to explain it, just looks nice, just do it. Next, we are going crazy and we're going to add this all to enhance the whole thing by adding a volumetric and some supporting lights. Let's go. So for this, I use the final geometry I used in my real project minus the seeds. We're going to cover this in a second. You can see it's pretty much the same thing as we just created ourselves. The big difference is that I noticed that this door in the front looks much nicer if it's like open. Because then the whole composition just looks much bigger, like the world is bigger. I added like some details, like some boolean cuts, some this, and then made some separations with this door color here, made some panel cuts here. It's just some extra things. I'm not trying to cover everything right now because the video is already long enough. You can figure it out for yourself. And this I copied to the other side. You're not gonna see it probably. And this, for example, this handle, I copied to the other side. So it just kind of makes sense that, you know, if it's on the right side, it should be on the left side. But as you can see, none of this is aligned. Everything is eyeballed for the camera. This is how I work. I work always with the intention, what does the camera see? What does the camera not see? And I'm not wasting my time for things nobody's going to see. But a small important thing I added is this geometry here. Okay, so this geometry acts like the wall behind the camera or the left of the camera. Obviously, I'm not going to waste time make it beautiful, because the only thing it's supposed to do is to create some bounce light back to the world. That's the only thing. This makes a huge difference on our metal pipes, as you can see, because, well, now the world is not empty. And it also makes our whole scene much brighter. I have an extra material on this called, it's supposed to be blocker. And you can also change it to a darker value if you want it to be, you know, darker, like less bounce light. But I thought that the white looks pretty nice. And then I also select my object and in display as I'm gonna change it to to wire. Yeah, to wire. One of them. This way I can still work in the viewport. I'm not gonna see it. And you can, by the way, do the same thing with this water, for example. Also make it bound. For the volume, we're gonna add a big cube covering the whole scene. We're gonna use the same trick with the wire I just showed you, and it has a principal volume for the material. Density with this number, I have a little bit of a darkish reddish color, and the anisotropy is also really important. In my case, 0.5. That's about it. Next, I'm going to add 3 area lights. They are coming through the 3 big windows, and they're acting like some sort of supporting lights for our sky texture. And you can see that the highlight on the water is much stronger, and we have this, let's say, nice God ray-ish like type of style. That's because the spread is super low on these. I think they're all duplicate from each other, literally the same light. Just keep the spread low. I then added 2 more lights inside the train. These two. They are pointing towards this wall, and they are helping us to create a little bit more details in the water, and also making this area brighter, which will be helpful later when we create the seeds. They actually have a 180 spread. And the 2 final lights that I use in my project are these 2 lights. At the moment, you're not gonna see a big difference in the render, but when we add the vegetation later, you will see the difference. These are all the lights I use in the scene. That's it. For the sky, I just used 2 image planes of the same image actually. I just used Shift A and then I'm gonna create a mesh plane, and I'm gonna select, for example, this is actually from Unsplash. It's literally a free texture you can get, link in the description obviously. Same thing, right? The only important thing is in the material of this mesh plane, you're gonna plug the texture into a emission shader. That's it. No principle, nothing. Just emission, strength to 1. Okay, but what about these 2 nodes? Well, if I hide the fog, you can see that, you know, the sky is nice. This is how it's supposed to look. But because of the fog, our sky is not really visible at all. So let me just actually hide the fog for a second. And if I plug in these 2 nodes, you can see this looks absolutely crazy. So I'm going to hide this for a second, and we're going to see the RGB curves with this setup makes the contrast absolutely ballistic. And the hue saturation, I just wanted it to be a little bit of a greenish tone instead of this blue tone. That's it. Looks absolutely weird, but if we turn on the fog, you can see that, okay, it kind of gets into the right direction. It's kind of cursed. It's absolutely not natural or like real life, but I don't care. Just this is how I roll. The next step is the color correction, which is so important for this piece, because if I turn on my color correction, you can see that the whole thing just changes dramatically. And then we are also going to use my paint filter to really establish the style of this thing. So for color correction and color grading in general, I use the add-on called Render Raw. So in this shading tab here, I will change to always in the compositor. And then I'm going to activate Render Raw, and you can see now the big difference in the color correction. And inside the compositor, you can see that there is a Render Raw node. And then here in my what's called render properties, you can see we have effects, color, and values. And if I decheck all of them, it's basically the normal render I have from before. But don't worry, I will also show you how you can achieve this look without Render Raw with just native compositor nodes. This is not a Render Raw tutorial, so I'm just gonna speed run through this, what I did exactly. So this Render Raw here, all of this is doing is I'm just using raw data instead of only AJX, but I still use AJX as my base view transform. I also use the high key photo preset, and then I have values, colors, and effects, and you can see there are a bunch of different options, and you can it is basically Lightroom but for Blender. That's it. And the preset just gives me predetermined like some things already. But the preset obviously does not look like this immediately, and I will go through what are the most important things. So let's start with the values. So if we uncheck and if we hide and unhide the values, we can see the biggest difference is just contrast. So here, this contrast slider is basically doing most of the work, and this shadow thing is a little bit into the minus, but I don't think it makes any difference, honestly. This I didn't touch at all, the details. The curves is the most important thing in the values, and you can see we have some sort of curve looking like this. Okay, so this makes a huge difference. But the most important things are the colors. So if I check the colors, you can see everything is much more saturated. And this is what I did. So the most important thing is color boost. The preset is something like this, I think. So I'm just gonna boost this up. And also the saturation, instead of 1 as a standard, I also turn it up. Let's go. Cool. And for the effects, the only thing I made is strength in the glare, probably. You can see the glare, especially important for the lights at the top of the train. This is the only thing. And important to mention is everything that you see here is also possible with native compositor nodes. This is just made very artistically friendly, obviously, but none of this is impossible. And I'm gonna show you now how you can achieve this similar effect, but with native compositor nodes. Okay, so let's just get rid of Render Raw here and also unchecked this. So we're gonna start fresh again. So first step is to handle the contrast, the values basically, and values are contrast basically. So what I do most is, instead of using none in the look under color management, I choose high contrast or very high contrast. Let's try high contrast, and you can all immediately see big difference. And for the colors, I recommend using the color correction node. kind of obvious. If we plug this in, we can see it is very similar to the thing that we did in Render Raw. It's probably not 100%, but whatever. For this project, I think it's totally enough. And the only three things that I changed is saturation, contrast, and gamma in this master tab here. The rest I literally didn't touch. So the saturation obviously makes sense, right? Because we want everything more saturated. The contrast, I turn it up from 1 just a little bit, and the gamma from 1 to 1.4. I think it really makes a difference because then it's just a little bit more brighter again. I think this is just way too dark, and that's about it actually. What you can also do is hit him with a glare node before after. I don't think it matters honestly. And then you can get the highlights for turn it to bloom. It's very important because bloom is by far the most fastest way to do this, like for your GPU. And then you can adjust the threshold for the lights at the top and for the highlights in general. So this glare node, literally the same as in Render Raw, no difference. Next, we are going to use this paint filter to really establish the style with this paintery look. It's really nice, and this paint filter actually, I made it actually, so you can actually get it for free on my Gumroad. Donations are always appreciated if you want to support me. Not mandatory though, because I believe that this paint filter is honestly not that hard. It's just these few nodes. So like I said, you can get it for free. And there's also a long video I did on my YouTube that I will link as well, where I explained how it works and stuff. So I'm not gonna explain it here. And the only thing here is that I really reduce the shapes, make it small, because if I crank this up, you can see it's just more paintery, but it's losing all the details. And I think these numbers, at least for me, work pretty well. And when I show the vegetation, you can really see the strength of the paint filter working. It makes a huge difference in my opinion, and it's just overall a very nice experience. And next step is to handle the seeds. I'm going to show you how I modeled and also made the materials for this. Let's go. So I will try to remodel the seeds. I'm gonna start with a plane. I'm gonna scale it down and turn it 90 degrees. I'm gonna apply the scale, and then in edit mode I will try to make this roughly the shape of the seeds I created before, something like this, just so I have the proportions, you know. Next I'm gonna make a small cut here so I can extrude this upwards. So now we have the side profile, let's say. Next we are going to edit mode, and then this and this vert, we're gonna select them and then press J to make an edge. And then in edge mode, I'm gonna select these two and then X and then dissolve edges. And this is really important for the topology later. Next, we can extrude it to create the seed basically. Looks about the same width. Now I can press Ctrl 2 to give it a sub D modifier. Now in edit mode, we are going to add some loop cuts so we can control the whole thing. For example, here we definitely need one. For this, for example, I will also press S and then Z and then 0 on the numpad. So we have this straight, and this we can move outwards a little bit so we can create this curvature. And then we can create another one at the top so it is more rectangle. We can create another one here so we have some sort of, you know, seed. Maybe this one is actually a little bit too much. It's just a trial error thing. It's just a normal sub D workflow. This, for example, maybe at the bottom we could need one. This one we can maybe turn a little bit here, and then we can also add one on the side, and this one as a side as well. You can obviously use a mirror, but I'm too lazy. I don't care. And then we already have something like this. Not bad. Now you can add some more supporting loop cuts, so you can also make everything a little bit more resolution. And the reason for this is so you have just more faces. So I have something like this, for example, and then I can, you know, just move them in just a little bit, so we can create some maybe shade smooth. And this way you can, you know, create like these some sort of ergonomic whatever. You know what I mean? Just give a little bit of something extra just to play around with it a little bit, you know, just have fun. Maybe this one was a little bit too much. I think something like this. So we have this nice round shape. Something like this looks fine. So I would say the seed is ready. Now, if I give the seed material, I have this nice glassy look. Looks really nice. I'm just gonna break it down real quickly. It's just these nodes. It's very simple. So all we have is a glass BSTF. This is the base of everything. And we can see now we have nice, very nice reflections. So this is already working super well. This IOR, you can play around this. I think it makes a huge difference, obviously. It is not realistic numbers, probably. I just play around with it until it looks good. So I don't really care about realism in this case. Something that can be pretty useful is maybe this Fresnel node, because this Fresnel node gives us like some sort of highlights that we can control a little bit better. So if we plug this in with a color ramp inside the colors, we can see that we can control it a little bit more. It's not super mandatory, but if you want more control, you can use this Fresnel. And if you want to color the whole thing, I would suggest use a volume absorption with the color that you want and just plug it into the volume. And I crank the density super high, and you can change it to any kind of color that you want. To make the rest of the chair, like this thing like behind the chair, is actually not that difficult. We're gonna grab the chair, we're gonna hide the sub D for a second, and then we're going to edit mode, and now we're gonna select all the faces at the bottom and at the back. I suggest pressing C. This gives us this brush-like selection. I think it's pretty useful for stuff like this. And with the mouse wheel, you can also increase the radius of the whole thing. You are not able to move your viewport meanwhile, but it is really not that much of a problem. And then deselect this in case you fucked up. Now you have this, then Shift D to duplicate it. Don't do anything, just press left mouse button once, so it's the same place. Then P selection. And then if in object mode, you can then select this new piece that you just did, okay? And then come to edit mode again, and then under extrude, you just want to do extrude along normals, and then you can extrude it something like this. For this one, we can give it the train material so it looks correct, and then in edit mode we can, for example, grab all of these faces, and then we can extrude it down. And we can also, give it a little bit of a taper, something like this. And then when we, activate the sub D again, and then also here the sub D again, we can see that now we can create some sort of, nice intersections. Here it probably makes sense to add another loop cut, so we have some sort of, a better connection, let's say. And here, for example, as well, maybe something like this. So the gap between here and here just doesn't look that crazy. And here also maybe add a sub D, so we have something like this. And literally this is how I create the seeds. Now you can combine them, array them, whatever, to create a whole row of seeds. Last but very important tip for the seeds, because we added this thing in the back, now the seed is actually really dark. And to fix this, we actually come here and we need to add a solidify modifier. And as you can see, it makes a tremendous difference, because with the solidify modifier, and it is extrude inwards to the seed, okay? This we can create some sort of thin glass look, which is impossible without this solidify modifier. It's kind of hard to see sometimes, but in the viewport, but if you hide it, you can see the difference it makes. So don't forget this. Okay, we are nearly finished. The next step I did was adding some nice vegetation. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not going to show you how I made this vegetation, because I use Sweeper's Arborea add-on, which is absolutely insane, and I highly recommend it. And the idea behind this is just using some nice flowers to really contrast all the hard surface and the water. Then we have some medium sized plants and grass, which in combination with the paint filter looks really, really nice. And all I did was just duplicate them here and in the background. and something like this, just so we can see the periphery, even though this is absolutely wrong, but who cares. And outside the train, I use some bigger plants, not trees, but just tall plants, let's say, to give the world just a little bit more environment, basically, and give the whole thing a bit more of an abandoned human type of feeling. So this was the idea behind the vegetation. The only thing I'm not super satisfied with Arborea is the animation, and I actually want full control over it. So I'm gonna show you how I made this really nice, subtle, wavy wind animation. Let's demonstrate the whole thing with this plant. The first effect is a simple deform modifier set to bend, axis, whatever, just choose whatever you want. And with this angle, we can control this and we can animate some sort of this type of movement. I then create an empty at the same origin point. By the way, both origin points should be at the bottom of the plant you're trying to animate. And for this empty, we have a single keyframe on Y, a single keyframe on Z, which you can do with right click and then insert single keyframe. And for both of them in the graph editor, under modifiers, I have a noise. Okay, add modifier, noise. That's it. And then you can just copy the values that you want here. The most important thing is the scale. I think the rest I didn't really touch. So if I play, it looks something like this, kind of weird. No problem, because inside the plant, inside the simple deform, we are going to check this empty we just created. Now, if you turn up the angle a little bit, we can see now our plant is moving a little bit like it's floating in the wind, kinda. And if we increase the angle, it is a little bit stronger then. For more variations, we can also animate the angle, just one keyframe on it. And then here you can also, under modifiers, create a noise and then increase the scale. This way you can also have more randomization into it. Okay, the second effect is a displace modifier. Now this looks absolutely dumb, but don't worry, you're gonna fix this. First, we're gonna create a new texture. Then we're gonna press this button to show the texture. First step is to change it to clouds. That's really, really important. Already it looks much better. Then we are going to change it to color. Then we're going to increase the size to 3. Now this looks still weird. So let's go back to the modifiers. Now we're gonna change the direction to X, Y, and Z. And then the strength we're gonna reduce. Okay. Now we're gonna change the coordinates to object, and we're gonna select a second empty. Okay. The second empty is at the same place in the origin as the first empty. And the second empty, the only difference here is that we only have a keyframe on the Z location. Okay. And in the graph editor, there is a generator. So no more noise, just a generator. And we're going to have a really, really small number for this thing. Now if we play it, we can see now it's starting to look, let's say, proper. And now it's just about fine-tuning the strength. So we're gonna reduce the strength, and then we can see now it is working, and it looks, I would say, pretty nice. And I will repeat the step for all of the other plants inside the project. For example, I have this grass asset, and this is literally the same thing. The 2 empties we created, I never redo this again. I use the same thing. The only difference is mainly the texture. So if I go to the grass texture here, it is the same. It's just a duplicate of the same texture, but here the size is very slow, very low. So if I crank this up to 3, like we did with the big plant, it is not that visible. And if I lower it, you can see that, okay, now we have much more wave-like movement for the grass. So depending on the size of my vegetation, I need to change the size of this texture. Now these are all my vegetations animated like the original data. So, and they all have the same origin, because all of them, they are all separated in different collections, and each collections, they have under collection this instance of offset. They're all the same. They have all the same origin, and you can easily do this by setting it to your cursor. Just make sure that cursor is on the right location. And the reason for this is that inside my instance collection, where I have my collection instances, I just make sure that under object they have, under instancing, they have the correct collection that I just showed you. And this way you can instance all of your animation but it is super resource friendly, because if you Alt D this, every time your computer needs to process these modifiers again, and it's gonna break your computer. And now you can see I have 24 FPS, everything is smooth. This is really important. And then, just because I can, I added these fishes. These are from the add-on called Geofish. Yes, I actually bought a fish add-on, don't judge me. Anyway, it's really nice. I'm not gonna explain to you how it works since it's a paid add-on. But these are in case you want it, these are the exact same values that I use. And the only funny thing is I just use this use curve, and I just create a Bezier curve, just a straight curve, and this allows me to control where the fishes are going. Honestly, this whole thing would work without the fishes. I just had the opportunity, so I just use it. So this is why I don't want to waste too much time covering it. For the fishes, if you want to create fishes yourself, I suggest watching the Ian Hubert's goldfish tutorial. I think it's really funny, and also it's kind of working. And if you don't have Arborea and you don't want to buy any vegetation, I can recommend this asset pack. It is really nice. I use it all the time, and all of this is free. For the final touches, I added some posters to the whole train interior, and you can use the same technique you use for the sky. So just mesh plane, any image, and in this case I also use the principle and not the emission technique. And with the paint filter, you can see it looks pretty stylized and pretty nice. So this was really a nice touch in the end. For example, here I added a poster from my local train. I fucking hate them, but that's another story. And I think this is everything I wanted to cover in this tutorial. I also added like some decals. These are actually paid decals, so I cannot really show you how I created them, but you can also use an image plane with some dots. It would work the same. Okay, that's it for the tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. I know this was maybe a little bit a lot, but I wanted to cover everything I did for this project, and I really enjoyed this project. It was really fun, and it turned out exactly how I wanted it to be, so I'm really happy with this. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, leave a subscribe. I would really appreciate it, because making these videos is actually pretty hard, but I still enjoyed it, and I hope you too, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.